His name was Thomas Kern. He was 38 years old. He had been a tree ranger in the Black Forest for 11 years, which means he had spent more time alone in those trees than most people spend in their own homes. He was not someone who frightened easily. His job required the opposite. Search and rescue operations in the dark, locating injured hikers in weather that grounded helicopters, walking trails alone at 2 in the morning with nothing but a headlamp and a radio. He knew the forest. He knew it in a way you would know something you have given years of your life to. Its sounds, its silences, its moods, the way it changes between seasons, between hours, between one side of a ridge and the other. He knew when something was wrong. On the night of the 3rd of October, something was wrong. And then something followed him out of the trees. Thomas no longer works as a tree ranger. He no longer lives near the Black Forest. He gave me 2 hours of his time in a flat in Freiburg, with the curtains drawn in the middle of the afternoon. He asked me to do one thing in return. He said, "Tell people that it doesn't stay in the forest." The Black Forest, Schwarzwald in German, covers roughly 6,000 square kilometers, or about 2,300 square miles, in the southwestern corner of Germany. Running along the eastern bank of the Rhine between Basel and Kassel. It is the largest contiguous forested area in Germany. The trees are predominantly Norway spruce, dense, tall, close together, planted in the 19th century to replace the original mixed forest that had been logged over centuries. The replanting created something visually dramatic but ecologically monotone. Rows of identical trees, same height, same spacing, stretching in every direction until the light runs out. It is, even in daylight, a forest that does something to your sense of direction. The uniformity is disorienting. One section looks exactly like another. The canopy closes overhead, and the sky disappears, and you are left with a narrow corridor of filtered green light that tells you very little about where you are, or which way you came from. After dark, it is something else entirely. The Black Forest has one of the densest accumulations of folklore of any region in Germany. The Brothers Grimm drew heavily from this area. Not the sanitized versions that became fairy tales, but the older, stranger, more violent stories that the Grimms themselves softened before publication. Stories about things in the trees that were not animals, things that walked upright but were not people, things that followed. The word of the old accounts used most consistently is Nachfolger, follower, not a ghost, not a demon, not a creature with a defined shape or a defined motivation, simply something that notices you and decides to stay behind you. The rangers who have worked the forest long enough develop a sensitivity to it. Not a belief, exactly. More like a professional awareness. You spend enough time in a place, and the place starts to communicate with you in a register that bypasses conscious thought. Thomas Kern had 11 years of that communication. On the night of the 3rd of October, the forest told him something was behind him. And then he made the mistake of turning around. Thomas was not in the room when I arrived. His younger brother, Felix, had driven up from across the city to be there. He did not say this was to support Thomas. He said it was because he wanted to tell me something first. Felix is 34. He's a secondary school teacher. He's the kind of person who chooses words with care and delivers them without drama, which made what he said considerably more disturbing than it would have been coming from someone less composed. He sat across from me and said, "I need you to understand what my brother was before this happened, because what he is now is so different that unless you understand what he was, you won't understand how serious this is." He told me Thomas had been the steadiest person he had ever known, the one the family called in a crisis, the one who showed up, who fixed things, never panicked, never catastrophized, never needed anyone to manage him. After the 3rd of October, Felix said, he called me at 4 in the morning. I had never received a phone call from Thomas at 4 in the morning my entire life. Not once. He was outside his house, standing in the street, and he was whispering. He wouldn't tell me what happened on the phone. He just said, "Come." And the way he said it, Felix stopped. He looked at the table. The way he said it, I didn't ask questions. I just drove. I asked Felix what he found when he arrived. Thomas standing in the middle of the street, under the streetlight, not on the pavement, in the middle of the road, facing his own front door. He had been inside his house, gone outside, and then couldn't make himself go back in. Felix paused. He said he could hear it inside. I asked Felix what Thomas was like now, months later. Felix chose his words with great care. He doesn't go out after dark. Not at all. If he has to, he takes a taxi, door to door, and sits in the middle of the back seat and watches the windows. He doesn't walk anywhere at night. He doesn't open doors after dark without turning every light on first. He checks behind him constantly, every few seconds. He's been doing it for so long now that I don't think he notices anymore. It has become as automatic as breathing for him. He looked at me steadily. You know, my brother used to walk alone in the forest at 2 in the morning without a second thought. Now he cannot cross a dark car park. Then we heard footsteps on the stairs. Felix straightened immediately. He looked at me once more and said, very quietly and very quickly, "Whatever he tells you it was, I believe him. Whatever he says he heard in that house when he was standing in the street, I believe him." Then Thomas walked in and Felix said nothing more. Thomas Kern is not what I expected. I expected someone visibly broken, someone who looked like what had happened to them. Instead, he was neat, composed, precise. He shook my hand. He sat down. He folded his hands on the table and looked at me steadily and said, "I tell you everything, but I need you to understand one thing first." I told him to go ahead. He said, "I know what the forest sounds like. I know every sound it makes, every animal, every weather condition, every way the wind moves through different densities of tree cover. I have 11 years of that knowledge in my body. So when I tell you that what I heard behind me on that path was not any of those things, I need you to understand that is not a casual statement. That is a professional assessment from someone with 11 years of relevant experience." He held my gaze for a moment to make sure I understood. Then he told me. These are his words, translated as closely as I can manage. It was a routine night patrol, trail section in the northern part of my zone. About 12 kilometers, 7.5 miles of path through dense spruce with some open sections along the ridge. I had walked it hundreds of times. I knew every meter of it. It was around 11 at night. No wind, very still, which is unusual for the section. There's normally airflow along the ridge. The stillness was the first thing I noted. Not alarming, just noted. About 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles in, I became aware of sound behind me. Footsteps on the path, maybe 15 to 20 meters, 50 to 65 feet behind me. My first thought was another hiker. I stopped walking and listened. The footsteps stopped exactly when I stopped, not a half step after, exactly when I stopped. That was the first thing that was wrong. A person walking in the dark, not aware they're behind a ranger. They don't stop the exact instant you stop. There's always reaction delay, always. This was simultaneous. I turned around and put my headlamp on full beam. Nothing. Empty path. Trees on both sides. Nothing. I stood there for 2 minutes. Listened. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. I told myself it was a deer paralleling the path in the trees, and turned back and kept walking. The footsteps started again. Same distance behind me. Same pace as mine. Exactly my pace. I stopped. They stopped simultaneously. I did not turn around this time. I stood very still and went through every possible explanation methodically. Echo from the terrain. An animal. Another person. Deliberately matching my pace. None of them held. The path doesn't produce that kind of echo. An animal doesn't match a human walking pace with that precision. And if it was a person deliberately mimicking my footsteps and stopping the instant I stopped and hiding whenever I turned around, that was worse. That was considerably worse. I started walking again, faster. The footsteps started again, faster. Same distance, matching me exactly the way a shadow matches you, not following, not chasing, attached. So I ran, and the footsteps ran. I ran for about 400 meters, roughly a quarter mile, before I had to stop to breathe. And in the second I stopped, before the sound of my own blood in my ears had faded, I heard them stop too. Still 50 meters behind me. Still exactly 50 meters. The distance had not changed. However fast I ran, the distance had not changed. I turned around, and this time something was there. I can't describe what it looked like, not because I don't remember. I remember it perfectly. I will remember it until I die. But because what I saw doesn't translate into description that would mean anything to you. It was dark, and it was tall, and the proportions were wrong in every dimension. Wrong in a way that things in nightmares are wrong, where you can't identify the specific problem, but every part of your brain is screaming that this does not exist in the world, you know. It was standing completely still. It was looking at me, and then it took one step toward me. One step. I don't remember the next part. I know I ran. I know I reached my truck because I came to it in the driver's seat at the trailhead with my headlamp still on and dispatch going on the radio. I don't know how long I was out. I don't know if I passed out in the truck or on the trail and just got there somehow. I drove home, went inside, turned on every light in the house, and then I heard it. Inside, not outside, not at the door, inside the house, a sound from the hallway, the same footstep, same weight, same rhythm, the same thing in my house that I had locked, that I had just entered from a locked car in a locked driveway. I went back outside, stood on the street, under the street light, and then called my brother Felix. I have not heard it since. I don't know what it means. I don't know if that means that it left. I don't know if it means it learned to be quieter. Thomas Kern handed in his ranger badge 4 weeks after the 3rd of October. He cited personal reasons. His supervisor noted that he had been an exemplary employee for 11 years and that his resignation was unexpected and out of character. The supervisor did not ask many questions. Rangers who work the Black Forest long enough develop their own relationship with what the forest does and does not contain. According to Thomas, his supervisor simply looked at him for a long time when he handed in the badge, and then nodded slowly and said, "Which section?" Thomas told him. The supervisor nodded again, then said, "I reassigned a trail." He didn't ask what happened. He didn't suggest Thomas was imagining things. He didn't recommend counseling or time off. He just reassigned the trail, which tells me that Thomas Kern is not the first ranger to walk away from that section of forest without explanation. Before I left, I asked Thomas one last question. I asked what he would tell someone planning to hike the trail. He thought about it, and then he said, "Don't stop walking. Whatever you hear behind you, don't stop. Don't turn around. Don't check. Just keep moving until you reach the trailhead and get in your car and drive away." I asked him why. He said, "Because it matches your pace. It always matches your pace. The only advantage you have is that it seems to need you to stop before it can close the distance." He looked at his hands. I stopped. I turned around and it closed the distance. Don't give it that chance.